I've got to tell you, I've done a number of these breakfasts in my time. We've never had this many questions before from an audience. This is huge. We're not going to get through all of these, I can tell you that. I'm going to go through them they're in no particular order. I'm going to ask them as they come. And I'm afraid, panel, it does mean that you're going to have to work extra hard, because those that we don't ask now, we'll ask you to, don't worry, you don't need to answer each one of you, every one of them, but we'll do it on the appropriate basis. But we'll make sure that all the questions are asked, and we'll put them on the website so that people can see the answers to those that we don't get to. Right. Okay. Right. Well, the first one's quite an interesting one. How do we address the environmental perception? Oil and gas, bad. Renewables, good. Who wants to kick off on that one? It's a nice, easy one to start with. Andrew?
Thank you. Yeah, probably easier to point to the person that doesn't work in the industry, although I'm considering moving, having watched the video. So if any of you with a vacancy in the reputation communication space could meet me in the far corner just afterwards. So listen, the parallels for our industry, there are many difficult areas that we operate in. So animal research could be considered one. We talked about some of the tensions before between just healthcare and profit, for example. And our experience in the short time that I've been working on this is that that it's engaging on the issues is the key, and that you know letting them run is the worst thing that can be done. So if you have an opportunity in any shape or form, get people around the table and discuss and get a roadmap and talk about the issues, engage on the issues, and see what can be done is the main. It's not purely communications. It is about action and delivery and being seen to be doing that as well.
I think that's a very good point, and I think the question is a very perceptive question too as well, because I think as an industry we have retreated. We got wrong-footed on the whole of the global warming debate. We lost our confidence in that, and we haven't therefore extolled properly the virtues of our industry. And indeed our industry has got a great history in terms of actually carbon reduction. If it hadn't been for the switch to natural gas from coal in electricity generation in this country, the UK couldn't have set, let alone met, its Kyoto targets. Impossible. We actually, perversely, are the one industry that has done more than any other to carbon reduction in the UK. And if you look at the role that natural gas can play going forward, the answer to global warming, certainly in the short term, is to stop coal being burnt in China and India and replace it with natural gas. Sorry, after that, Paul.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of platitudes to that, really. I think each of the three of us tried to say in our remarks that if you don't tell your own story, somebody else is going to tell it for you, particularly on a difficult issue like the tension between environmental concerns versus renewable energy, point one. And point two, any communication professional in the room will tell you that if you actually want to create a locus of conversation through which you can have this honest engagement, you actually have to run towards a conflict, not away from it.
Felix?
And to add to that one, I would take it out of the polarizing context and say it's not an either-or question, it's an and question. It's both renewables and EMP. And that's part one. Part two to the story is we can also highlight the tremendous changes of technology which lead to zero emissions from the platforms where nothing is being disposed. Yeah? There's a lot of work taking place, especially on the environmental side in our industry, where we can show that we try to minimize the impact of our industry.
Okay, thanks. Felix, this next one is for you. Was it your first response to the BBC request to say no? And if so, what made you say yes?
Before we went back to the BBC, we had an internal discussion how we want to respond. That's part one. Yeah? So we thought it through, got internal alignment, and then we went back to the BBC with a definite yes. That's part one. Second part of the question?
And what made you say yes?
It was a great opportunity, and we believed that what I said actually is true, is we have nothing to hide. We are proud of what we are doing, and we have a good story to tell. And if we are fully prepared, we should be able to have a good story which also delivers what the BBC was looking for.
Okay, the next one's for you, I'm afraid, as well. It's just the way they are. I detect a cynic behind. How many HSE hours spent checking Babbage footage? How many HSE hours spent checking Babbage footage?
To my knowledge, and Kjetil, correct me if I'm wrong, we did not check the footage. It went out as it was filmed. There were live streams, yeah? So it was nothing to be edited and commented. We really trusted our people. I mean, that is not something we are making up. We prepared our people with respect to media training, one. We prepared our people with respect to messages because we wanted to get certain messages out which are consistent with the topics which the BBC wanted to cover. Yeah? And that was it. And then we let the people run free because we believe we have technical experts. They are just as ethical as we are, so there's nothing to hide. So let them run. Trust your people.
Thanks. Andrew, we might start with you on this one. How do we ensure that the supply chain have their stories told and it's not dominated by the big boys? And I think that's meaning, you know, how do we make sure that the major oil companies don't dominate the story, and how does everybody get in across the supply chain?
So our experience has been that it's actually the point of interface between a lot of the big companies and a lot of the small companies are where some of the most exciting innovations happen. And so we've had a process of drawing those stories out. And I think it is, you know, this isn't, there's no magic formula for this. It's about proactivity. It's about doing the kinds of things that you're doing here. It's about drawing those stories out, being able to underline and supporting companies that don't always have communications functions to be able to do these, but actually how can you access those stories and look at the cross-industry benefit of being able to tell that story. So it's, you know, it's not always easy because everyone has competing priorities, like running the business, and you know, but it is worth, in terms of the big picture, it's worth drawing those stories out.
Yeah, I'm acutely aware of that too, that some of the, we talk badly about companies having their, pass this over to your communications department. Well, you know, a lot of companies do not have a communications department. In that regard, Oil and Gas UK is always prepared to help, by the way, and if we can be of any help to any company, we will always be of help to you. Please be assured of that. Paul, do you want to add anything to that? No?
You know, it's the, as I mentioned in my presentation, I was staggered when I first started working with the industry about the richness of experience of the people that work in it, in terms of the kinds of work that they do and where they live, because one has a perception, because you've got some pretty big assets out there in the field. It's pretty impressive kit, so if anybody needs to publicize your industry, they're going to take a picture of a big thing and put it on the paper. So I just think that to change perception, we're going to have to, as we're trying to do through the Energizing the Nation's Future website, we're asking you to click through and very simply register and very simply send us your story, send us your I'm proud to be in oil and gas statements, along with pictures, so that we can begin to grab all of that information and make it into the communications collateral that we need to begin to change perception. The other thing that we're doing, as you'll see, if you register, please register, is to create a profile of your geographic location and the category of the kind of work that you do. That will allow us, through data, to manipulate all of that and create the visual images we need to show, to display that diversity, that richness.
Okay, thanks. If I may, I'll move on with the next question. Is the UK a problem? What is the perception of oil and gas in other developed countries, and what can we learn from their approach to improving it, if anything? Felix, do you want to start with that one? I mean, is it a UK problem, or is this this perception of our industry, is it an international problem?
It's a human problem, I would argue, because wherever you go, you will find an industry in any country where people are not happy with or do not have a full appreciation what something is about. I believe you find parallels in other countries, in other industries, so we are no different from anybody else.
Any of the other guys, do you want to? No? Nothing particular on that. Okay. What does the panel feel is the biggest single factor in the current public perception of our industry? So what's the dominant influence, I guess that's saying, upon the perception of our industry? Do you want to do a sort of, just to balance that, a sort of positive and a negative? What do you think is the most positive thing people think about it? So what do you think is the most negative?
Well,
Paul?
I'll give it a go. So when we started our research, well, take a step back for a minute, right? We're all human beings, and we exist in our own social circles. I have worked in politics and public relations, which makes me, on the list of trusted professions, you're pretty low on the food chain. You guys are not that far ahead of me on the food chain because of perception. So we all internalize the experience and feel, I think, a certain persecution complex. But what opinion research showed us and demonstrated is the overwhelming fact is that people don't know anything about you. Now, of course, politicians and those who are closer to the industry or work in the industry have strongly held, strongly based views. But most people, and believe it or not, most politicians, and believe it or not, most regulators are tremendously ignorant of the industry and what it delivers. So the overwhelming perception, I think, is just it's there, it's big, it's dirty. And that's a big challenge because it's all based on a lack of awareness. It's just one of the reasons we're trying to run this campaign. What we also found in our research was that when you're demonstrating to people in a very short argument the contribution that the industry makes, their perceptions are very easily shifted into the positive column. Now, psychologically, this may be difficult for all in this room, but we're not going to be loved here, right? You've got to find that love elsewhere. But we can certainly be respected for the contribution that we make as an industry. And when we began to tell those stories of economic contribution, innovation, and skilled job creation in those research groups, it found a very welcoming response. So there's a great opportunity.
Thanks. Anybody else want to come in on that, or Andrew?
Yeah, so not in the specifics of the industry, but one of your, I guess, your biggest challenges is that you're big business, and one of your biggest opportunities is that you're big business, and how you manage. So within that then comes, okay, well, how do we change what the perception of that is, and what are the messages that need to do that, and what is it about a big business that's somehow impenetrable to a lot of people, and how can you change that into a message that people is simple and that people understand? Because I think certainly it's reflected in our own industry that actually it's the level of understanding is critical. And we have a lot of evidence to suggest that the more people understand the business, the greater their affinity to the business. It isn't love. Paul's right. We have to get our emotional attachments from cuddly toys and other sources, pets and so on. But it is about getting people to know what you do and why you do it. And that makes the biggest difference.
Thanks very much. Felix, could the industry make it easier for the press to get access to executives and to offshore facilities? It's too difficult at present. For example, 5-day survival courses. Not 5 days, are they? But 5-day survival courses.
To make it easier for the press to have access requires that we're prepared to have a story to tell. So again, it's give and take. There's no point inviting somebody if you don't have anything to say. So it requires a willingness to engage, to prepare, and think about what we want to communicate. That's part one. To make access easier, I think, no, it should not be made easier with respect to offshore installation compared to anybody else we're taking offshore. We are focused on safe delivery of our projects and the hydrocarbons we we produce. That requires everybody going offshore to go through a certain regime. I see no point why we should make exemptions to that for the sake of communication. We should take anybody as serious an offshore worker coming outside, and the press is no different there.
Right. You guys okay on that? Right. How do we energize the youth, future professionals, to join our industry? Do we require to expand the timeline perceptions they may have about the term remaining? Paul, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I mean, I think there are two elements to that question. One is how do you reach the youth? And by the way, if you find out, can you tell me? Because I'm struggling with my 16-year-old daughter at the moment. And two is then how do we continue to refresh the story of the innovations that are extending the life cycles of the field? So one of the big focuses of the Energizing the Nation's Future campaign will be to reach your future skilled employees, we hope. So in September, we're going to host a major stakeholder event called the Innovation Nation Debate at the Royal Academy of Engineers in London. It'll be hosted by a prominent public scientist, Brian Cox, we're hoping. Keep your fingers crossed. We're going to invite an audience of university engineering students. We're going to do it in conjunction, hopefully, with a few centres of engineering excellence. The event will be filmed. It will then be subsequently edited and streamed live into universities. Sorry, not live, streamed subsequently into universities, hopefully to serve as an awareness building and recruiting tool for the industry with your next generation. In terms of saying that there is an horizon, I actually think if you can faithfully, hand on heart, say that you've got another 20 years, you know, a reality of life is that most young people are moving jobs and careers in relatively short life cycles. They're not thinking that far ahead. So your challenge is to get them in the door, it feels to me, and then once they're in the door, persuade them that it's worth sticking around.
Thanks very much. Okay.
Yeah, I think one comment to add on the recruiting young people. I think we are a very exciting industry to work in. We have a breadth of skills, everything from commercial finance, technical, subsurface drilling. If you look at the disciplines we employ in our industry, there's something for anybody in there. Yeah? We have a big geographical spread if you include the supply chain. We are international. Yeah? Career opportunities are fantastic, but we have to be able to communicate what we are about and what it actually means to work in our industry. And that is, I hope oil and gas will help with the perception study. Now, basically, with this initiative, we can help shift that perception to show what an attractive industry we are.
Okay, I think the next question is for me, actually. What do the Oil and Gas UK board think about this? They're behind it, is the answer. I wouldn't be up here talking to this if they didn't support it. We have discussed and debated this at board. We did initial research, which was funded last year, and this year we have put, significant budget funds behind this. I should also say that the board is watching this with interest as well. I talked about this being a campaign. I personally hope that it leads on to something much bigger in the longer term, but we are going to be measuring the outcomes from this. We're going to measure both qualitative and quantitative outcomes of this. We're going to see whether what we're doing here, whether it does work, and what any adjustments need to be made as we go through this. So it is, I don't want to call it an experiment, it's not that. It is a campaign, but we're going to be watching this campaign very closely, measuring the outcomes and seeing what we can do to learn from that and how we can improve going on in the future. But this wouldn't be going ahead, I can assure you, if the Board of Oil and Gas UK did not approve it, and they do approve it, as I said before, in the context of that third strategic objective that we've adopted, which is to raise the positive profile of our industry. Okay, great to see E.ON working with the BBC. Bibby worked with the TV company on the production of The Harbour, which gave insight into what vessels in Aberdeen Harbour do. Operators need to open up to give the good news stories. Subsea UK offer a lot of opportunities to do this, but we find Hands are tied by company red tape. Also, we need to ensure that TV companies use up-to-date footage, not the usual 3 images: aging platform, helicopter, and driller in his PPE being sprayed with mud. Good comment. I agree with all of that. So, and thanks to Subsea UK, we're looking forward to working with you on this. Paul Baverstock, can you please explain the provenance of your figures regarding the 13.4% contribution to UK? This doesn't match with what I've heard in the past, and if you could explain what exactly you mean, I would appreciate it. So somebody questioning your number there, Paul.
I'll answer that question in a moment, but I just wanted to add, in response to the previous question, when you've got to work hard to give journalists the kit that they need. So keeping your own content up to date and compelling is important. You've got to make sure they get it, and you've got to give it to them in a form that they can use. That is to say, broadcast ready if it's filmed, easily downloadable, and so on. So there is a mechanical background requirement to making sure that that happens. And then you've just got to build relationships between your comm staff and the journalists to make sure that you can pick up the phone and say, look, you are going to use this piece of film that we've sent for you, not your usual stock out-of-date footage. In terms of the figures that I quote, they come from the House of Commons Library, given to us directly from the Office of National Statistics. And it's gross value added, not gross domestic product, which is gross domestic product and then tax minus any subsidies. That is the provenance of the 13.4% figure, and indeed all the others. And if anybody's interested in all of those, we can put all of those up, I think, on the website, the Oil and Gas UK website, so you can get a broader view, which is quite interesting because it looks at the financial industry, it looks at the agricultural industry, and so forth.
Okay. This is to Andy. Do you think your attempts to improve farmers' reputation perceptions has been successful, and to what extent? If so, to what extent?
So I think this is the absolute key question, and also the one that we debate most with our board, who are all commercial CEOs of UK affiliates of pharma companies. And what they want to see is a return on investment. So they want to say, you know, we put X into this campaign, and where is Y, Andy, is the usual comment. And you can measure outcomes in various ways, but I think there are some things in life that you have to instinctually know that it's kind of the right thing to do. And we're engaged at the moment in our 5-yearly cycle of pricing negotiations that we do with the UK government, which ABPI is the body of. Now, if the environmental conditions, if the reputation of the industry, etc., is in the wrong place, which sets the overall context for those negotiations, you know you have an issue. We also are in the context where you have, I suppose, different layers of reputation can be a little bit like a kind of onion, where you've got the kind of general public, but then you've got, as Paul described, the special publics on the way, right through to sort of absolute key, the payers in our circumstance, the prescribers and so on. So you've got all these levels, and we can show a very direct change and shift in those narrow ones, the ones that we interact, our special publics, as Paul described. So those ones are the measurable bits, and that we have seen a complete shift in our relationship there. So the Royal College of Physicians released a report in 2009 talking about the breakdown of trust between industry and the NHS. The same Royal College of Physicians now co-chair the group I referred to earlier. We're working with industry to address the issues directly I suppose, related to the work that we've been doing. So around your special projects, you can do it. When you get out to the outer layers of I'm taking the onion too far here, but when you get to the outer side, like the general public, you could do a huge campaign in the UK, and someone externally in the States or wherever drops the ball. It's a large international news story. Of course, it's going to impact on your reputation. And you may say, well, actually, we haven't moved the needle. And that's why I would really advocate identifying the special publics you can measure about delivering a strategy that's related to them, and sometimes just accepting that at the outer layers you're not in control of every variable, and that is the case.
Felix, you want to
if I can add to that quickly, one thing we should remember is the whole media coverage, the whole game has shifted. There's much more media available. Information travels much faster today than it did 10 years ago. There's social media and Twitter. Transparency has increased. As a consequence of that, we have to be prepared to communicate. Otherwise, someone else will do it for us, and we might not like the outcome. So we have to engage.
Very good. Okay, I'm afraid we've almost run out of time, but there's just time for one last question, which is quite a big one. You may have seen me shuffling. I was just shuffling where there was a great similarity between a question we'd asked before. But I assure you, all of the unanswered questions will be put to the panel, and we'll put the answers up. So, last question: how do you restore institutional trust in a society that is increasingly sceptical of any institution? Wow. Who wants to go first on that? Paul?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think the answer is straightforward. Behave properly. Demonstrate that you're behaving properly, and always tell the truth. And be honest and authentic. There is great power. The biggest power in communication is in human communication. That is in the things that we demonstrate. If you behave properly, if you build relationships with your customers, with your regulators, with your employees, and treat people as you would expect to be treated, be honest and authentic, and tell the truth about yourselves, and don't run away from criticism, I think that you can restore faith in yourself as an industry. I happen to think, however, that if we all behave like that more broadly, we'd begin to restore more faith in all our institutions, governmental and business.
It's a very good answer, and if I may, I'm going to close it there. Thank you very much indeed. Can I just mention, we've got a number, that we can throw them up on the screen, we've got a number of upcoming events, and can I draw your particular attention to the London Breakfast Briefing on the 9th of May. I'm pleased to say, at quite short notice, we have got Edward Davey, MP, Secretary of State for Energy, who is going to come and give a breakfast briefing there. It's a pretty short brief affair, 8 till 9 a.m. in London on the 9th of May. Details are on our website. It's quite short notice, that's why I'm spending some time on it. It would be good if we could get industry leaders there in front of the Secretary of State and discussing our industry with him. And his topic is going to be the government's policy and practice towards the oil and gas industry. And you can see that the other events coming up there on the screen as well. Well, it just remains for me to thank you first, ladies and gentlemen, for being such an engaged and participative audience. I think it's pretty obvious from the questions and the involvement here that you found something stimulating here. I certainly did, and I'd really like to thank our three speakers, Andrew, Paul and Felix, for really three excellent presentations and a great panel session as well. And they get no other thanks or reward, so could you please reward them in the usual customary way, please?